Greetings, friends and supporters of Corpus Christi for Unity and Peace. I hope that you're doing well this Thanksgiving week. I'm sure moms are busy trying to prepare a beautiful Thanksgiving meal. I always pray for people that may not have those to circle around friends and family, and those that may be missing a loved one during this, Thanksgiving week. I just pray for, peace and love and joy in your hearts, and for protection and God's blessings for all of you. Several things that I want to cover. I guess the first is this. We are a Catholic faithful that is one of Thanksgiving, and I count myself so blessed for each one of you. We had a prayer rally in Indianapolis in front of Carmel High School this past Saturday, and it was freezing cold and the wind was whipping, but that did not deter, huge number of faithful that came out. And what really shocked me was that people came out from different faiths, not just the Catholic faith, to pray with us to drive Satan out of the Carmel High School and all the Carmel schools. What happened there was that the Carmel schools approved of a satanic club in the school in 2020. And despite a lot of efforts, including Father Richard Dorr of Our Lady of Mount Carmel trying to go and meet with the principal a year ago, to no avail, they would not shut down that club. But this was posted to the Our Lady of Fatima site and to John Horvath's site. And people came from all over the Midwest on the busloads and from the local area to pray that that club be shut down. And guess what? It was. But that does not mean that Satan's gone, because as we know, from many exorcist priests that we've heard from, including Father Ripperger, that we need to continue to pray for cleansing prayers to drive Satan out of those schools. And so we showed up again this last Saturday in the freezing cold to pray. And it was so many of the Catholic faithful, but it was also people of the Protestant faith that showed up with us to pray. So it was a real act of faith and devotion to Christ and our Blessed Mother to drive Satan out of those schools. And we're going to continue. I hope you all join me throughout the country to pray that Satan is driven, along with all the demonic forces, out of those schools. So I want to thank all the faithful that joined us. The second thing is this. We need more priests to join us in this. There was no priest there. And we need to implore upon Bishop Doherty in the Lafayette Diocese and all bishops to support us in these type of prayer rallies. It's really sad to see when we don't have priests joining us in these prayer rallies, whether that's in front of an abortion clinic or that is to protect our children from these demonic forces. We need priests to be at the helm leading us in this prayer. And yes, the laity rise up to fight against these demonic forces that are coming at us in spiritual warfare all over. But we also need good, faithful priests to help lead us in this effort. So I call upon each of you to write your priest, to write your bishop, to ask them to be the spiritual leaders we need them to be for us. Here's the next thing I want to cover. I was at the Enough is Enough conference in Baltimore. And why was this taking place? It was taking place at the same time that the USCCB was meeting. Frankly, it was meeting in the same hotel, and it was amazing to see various bishops congregate right there in that same hotel on the waterfront. And here's my observation first on the conference. Michael Voris opened up, and he wanted to remind all of us Catholic faithful that we have supernatural hope. And this is a hopeful message. We cannot forget that amidst all of these, dark forces, including bishops letting us down, that we have supernatural hope, and we have our Blessed Mother who will stand on the serpent and crush him and drive this evil out, whether it's evil out of the church or it's evil out of our nations. And we can't forget that. And so we have to remember that, despite all of these things that are going on around us, we have to remember that we have hope, and we always have hope. But there was a couple of themes throughout this entire day, and it was really powerful because, there was about 1,500 people there, and it was cold, but people were standing up and chanting and screaming toward that hotel. And I'm sure the bishops heard us. I'm sure they did. But, James Grine got up and spoke. And if you remember, James Grine was the victim of Theodore Carrick, who was one of the most vocal, ardent critics of what happened to him when he told his story 3 years ago of what happened to him as a victim of abuse by Theodore McCarrick. At one point, he broke down crying, and we chanted from the audience, "We love you, James." Why do we love James? Because he had the courage and conviction to speak the truth and be true to himself and to all of us, the faithful, to point out the wrongs that were done to him and so many others. He talked about being behind the wall for 20 years, suffering from that kind of abuse, and how he revealed his story 3 years ago. And because of his story, there's so many people that have now come forward because of that. And that's an interesting point. It's a takeaway for all of us. Sometimes one person has to stand out in front and be that lone person to be the beacon of light and hope for the rest of us. Are you that person? Are you that person in your community that is going to speak truth and be convicted in that truth to lead others to proclaim that truth? And, some may say, well, you don't want to be negative. Well, this isn't being negative when you're proclaiming the truth. We have to be the John the Baptist out there in proclaiming that truth. The other thing that I wanted to point out was Father Altman. He was a fiery force at this Enough is Enough conference. We have to pray like David when we're going up against Goliath. And part of his message was that silence is complicity. So this is a theme that I'm trying to weave for you. We cannot be silent in all of this. There was somebody who approached me this week because I've been so concerned that Bishop Doherty of the Lafayette Diocese issued a memo discouraging his priests from offering communion on the tongue to the faithful in the Lafayette Diocese. Thankfully, there's a lot of priests that are going ahead and offering communion on the tongue, but our bishop refuses to do this. But this week, someone of the faithful has decided to again resume receiving our Lord and Savior in the Eucharist on the tongue. And a priest, in disgust, his facial expression gave her the communion on the tongue. She approached him after Mass and said, I noticed how upset you were when I received communion on the tongue. And he looked right in her eyes and said, "It absolutely disgusts me to do that." Can you imagine a longtime priest telling somebody of the faithful who reverently wants to adore the Eucharist and reverently receives on the tongue because she has interiorly discerned that that is the way to receive Jesus. And she is told by a longtime priest that that disgusts him. Furthermore, this same priest in another occasion told her he does not understand why communicants receive communion so frequently. Why do they go to daily Mass? They don't need to do that. Shocking. Silence is complicity. We must rise up and we must point these things out and say that they are wrong. And that somebody, a priest especially, that says something like this is absolutely blasphemy. It's blasphemy, and we cannot stand for it. So I love Father Altman's message to us. The other one was Jim Havens, he leads the effort for simple truth. He led the men's march the day before the Enough is Enough conference, and he talked about facing reality and repenting and resolving to do more. And he was talking about protecting the innocent, the unborn within the womb. and how he invited bishops to march with him for the unborn in that march with the men. And do you know that only 3 out of the more than 220 bishops that he offered that invite to took him up on that offer? It's just shocking to me. What is going on with our bishops? That they will not walk for pro-life, that they will not express publicly their view that it is wrong, that abortion is wrong, which leads me to my next point. And I know I'm moving in and out of this, but the document that they were supposed to vote on, which was Eucharistic coherence, it ended up being nothing more than a watered down document. And you can read all about it on every news outlet, Catholic news outlet. It is disappointing when they will not uphold Canon 915, which simply states what we already know in canon law, that a priest or a bishop must refuse somebody who obstinately persists in grave sin. Why would they not put that in that document? Because they have made the Eucharist something political. And why are we going to tolerate that kind of behavior? It's an abomination. Frankly, it's an abomination. And when we decide that we're going to make politicians into little gods, and frankly, that's what the bishops have done now, instead of plainly stating that this is wrong, there are wrongs that are black and white, and this is one that is black and white. We cannot allow bishops that are pro-choice, that that propagate legislative pieces that promote abortion, and that then take our dollars to publicly fund abortion through the Hyde Amendment. How is it that we can allow them to continue to receive communion and then expect that any of the faithful any longer continue to believe that that is the real presence in the Eucharist? It's no surprise that in the latest surveys that more than 80% of Catholics don't believe that that is any longer the real substance of Jesus in that Eucharist. Why would they? When we would allow grave sinners to go up and receive communion, while Cardinal Supich will give communion to a Protestant Mayor Lightfoot, and still proclaim that this is a source and summit. It defies truth. It just defies truth. So one of the others that I want to point out to you, and it's on the Church Militant website that was at the day for the Enough is Enough conference, was Brian Dux. And this is a unique case of where he is suing the Archbishop of Detroit. And it's because the Bishop Vigneron, has decided to attack Father Edward Perron, who was apparently a great pastor of this parish, and he was removed for charges of misconduct, which were falsely constructed. And the people that they brought forward with the charges have actually said, we never accused Father Perron of this charge. And they have since recanted or said, we don't know why Archbishop Vigneron would ever use our names to say that we were making these accusations against Father Edward Perron. So now the actual parish is suing the Archbishop Vigneron because of falsely removing Father Edward Perron. This is a case to watch for all of us because it's in civil court. And if this actually is upheld, it's something that we might take notice of civilly, that laity can act on. The other thing, the last point that I'll make is this. There are funds that are being misused, misappropriated within the Catholic Church. And we want to be generous donors of the Catholic Church. We all do, because we're called to tithe. And I have always tithed my 10%, but we have to be careful and discern carefully to whom we give those funds to. We're called to be prudent stewards. And Michael Hitchborn reported from the Lepanto Institute his very detailed research at that Enough is Enough conference, the collections that were made for Peter Pence and the funds that are being used out of that are actually being misused. And also that the Campaign for Human Development has actually been collecting funds and then using some of those funds in support of organizations that actually advocate and use the funds to support abortion. And we can't have any part of that. So if your parish is supporting the Campaign for Human Development, I encourage you to go out to the Lepanto Institute and look at the body of research, because it is detailed, auditable evidence to show that those funds are being used in an inappropriate manner. The last thing I'll conclude on is Stephen Brady's investigation. He's with the Roman Catholic faithful, and he has been exposing corruption since 1995. And he has been looking at this one thing about the American University in Jerusalem that wanted this gentleman to help set this up. And in fact, this one gentleman that was asked by the Vatican to set this up with the American University in Jerusalem, his father was the one that gave the Dead Sea Scrolls to the church. Interestingly enough, he was given the power of attorney in Jerusalem to effect setting up these organizations. Well, what ended up happening is money started being channeled to these entities within Jerusalem, and for which this gentleman said, we have no idea why these monies are being channeled and then being sent to other entities, and it's in large dollar amounts. And he finally figured out that he believed it was money laundering. And unfortunately, this very devout Catholic was even putting his own money into this project, and they even misused his money, $30 million of his money. I'll be circulating a 2-page document from Stephen Brady regarding what could be one of the largest frauds in the Catholic Church that Stephen Brady is uncovering. I'll close with this. You know, there are all these things that were uncovered at this Enough is Enough conference, including $5 billion that have gone as payouts to victims of sexual abuse from the clergy. But I want to leave you with still a message of hope. In the midst of all these terrible things happening, there are so many good things happening, not only with Catholic faithful at the local levels, but there are good priests. There are many lovely priests in local parishes that just want to do the right thing, but they're often in fear of being canceled themselves. So we must continue to pray for our priests, to pray for our bishops and our cardinals, and to pray that as laity, we continue to have the courage and conviction to speak the truth in all circumstances. I just wish you an abundance of blessings during this Thanksgiving holiday, and God bless you and thank you for all your support of Corpus Christi for Unity and Peace.